Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back. As you know, this is the second session of 4 planned sessions to talk about our program that we're doing with SANBI, and Mandy Barnett from SANBI will give you a little bit more detail just now. And the idea, the big picture, is to build a set of partnerships involving corporate sector and others in building an adaptation pipeline for the Green Climate Fund and potentially other funding opportunities. And so, although there are small groups here, the idea about filming them is we want to make this as an inclusive process as possible. And so in parallel to the events, we are going to release a set of videos that will help hopefully bring people along this journey with us. But you are very important to this process as the kind of live studio audience, not quite live, the delayed film studio audience. So every now and again, I'll hold up a plaque that says laugh, and then you laugh and cry. I won't do that, but yeah, so it should be quite a fun session. So please keep it quite interactive. As you know, with all of these sessions, all of the speakers and panelists are quite happy for you to interrupt and ask questions, particularly if we get acronym heavy. So as you know, climate change people can speak in acronyms for several sentences without using any actual English words. So just watch out for that, and please feel free to interrupt. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so then just the agenda for the day. So this is roughly what we're going to do. Mandy will do an intro. We've got a few sneak teasers from the videos that we did from the first session. And then so here we'll talk a little bit about the global finance architecture, what's happening at the GCF, a little bit of insight from what's happening in the COP. And then I will do a quick intro to the panel. So I'm conscious that the room is quite a big mix of expertise. We've got people who come from banks and therefore have quite a good finance understanding, and we have people who are in project development and maybe don't have as strong a finance development. So I'm going to use our 3 teaser pictures that we use to get people up to speed for finance conversations, and then we will have the panel where we'll get into the meat of how we go about making progress. Does that make sense? Everybody happy with that? Okay, very good. And then our panelists, who are all kind of experts in the space, will really, I've written down some really tough questions, so it should be fun. Yeah. Okay, good. So let me hand over to Mandy.
Thanks, Steve, and good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. I'm Mandy Barnett from the South African National Biodiversity Institute, and we're an accredited entity of 2 global climate funds, the Adaptation Fund and the Green Climate Fund. And what that means is that instead of these funds being accessed by international multilateral institutions, which has been the traditional way in which these kinds of funds have been accessed, we are able to access the funds as a national entity. And this, in the language of the funds, is called direct access. So it's quite an important innovation in the infrastructure of these funds, in that what it does is it gives developing countries increased agency over the way the funds are programmed and spent. And as SANBI, we're very passionate about this, and we're part of a community of many other developing countries that have got institutions like ours that are trying to innovate in this space. Currently, we have got 2 adaptation funds under implementation. They're worth $10 million altogether, and they're playing out in the Mopani district in Limpopo, the Namakwa district in Namaqualand, and the Umgunguglovo district in KZN. And at a later session, we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what those projects are about. But essentially, we're learning a lot of lessons about what works and what doesn't work on the ground in terms of actually getting this climate finance from a very abstract space and bringing it to the ground where it starts to make a difference. As part of our accreditation with the Green Climate Fund, we have the task of developing a Green Climate Fund adaptation pipeline of projects. And as part of that, the conversation has been, where's the private sector? So Steve touched on something quite interesting now, which is that we talk different languages. Finance speaks finance, government speaks government, development speaks development, and often we don't understand each other and we don't come together. And so what this process is about is seeing if we can open up a conversation between the private sector and the public sector to unlock a response to climate change that delivers local level adaptation benefits for vulnerable South Africans. So we're very excited to be working with you. We're very excited to be getting to know you, finance people, and how you work. And thank you for the opportunity that you're giving us for you to get to know government and how we work, the funds, how they work, what they'll fund and what we don't. And in all of this, the content. What is climate change? How is it affecting us? What does adaptation look like? And how can we come together as a partnership to unlock these sustainable and resilient outcomes for South Africa? Thanks so much. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks. Any quick questions for Mandy? No, good. Yeah, please. She escaped the panel, so feel free to ask hard questions.
Find out, right, through your sort of finance concepts that you actually explain a little bit later, right? So with some of the projects, and I'll use Tiger Brands as an example, some of the adaptation projects that we'll look at would sit very much in the enterprise development. How much do you guys push that agenda in terms of the finance models if we approached for a potential project, for example?
So I guess the question, if some of you couldn't hear, is what is the opportunity here, I guess, for us to integrate social improvements, SME development, community upliftment into these programs?
So what we're looking at mostly is how are people vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and what needs to be put in place to reduce that vulnerability or increase their resilience. Now, the kinds of things you're talking about are responses, right? What about if we invest in SMMEs, right?
So for I think a quick example is what we're doing currently with SMMEs in terms of doing farming practice, because take into account the nature of the products that we produce. We've opened that as a big, and we've been quite vocal about that in terms of some of the initiatives that we've piggybacked on, which touches to elements of adaptation. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. So we do quite a lot of work in the small-scale farming space, more with household level food growers, where they're very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. You know that. If it's rain-fed production, it's a problem. The seasons are coming at different times. There's a lot of unpredictability in the system. And we're doing quite a lot of work around providing early forecasts for these kinds of farmers, introducing different kinds of crops, and working obviously with the experts that do that. SANBI's not an expert in the agriculture space, but we unlock those partnerships. So we'd be very interested in talking about that. And then what you'd need to do is the way that these funds are accessed is through an accredited entity like SANBI. SANBI is only accredited for grant-based finance. Other entities are accredited for other kinds of finance. So once you know what you want to do, part of this process will be to say, well, who's your best accredited entity partner in order to be able to unlock the resourcing? So it starts off with what's the problem? How do we want to respond to it? And then building that up to go and look at, well, what is the best structure for a project to be able to access resources to resolve or respond to whatever it is you're wanting to look at.
But we do have Rest on the panel later, who does a lot of small business seed type funding. So yeah, we will talk about that. I think it's a key component to unlock private sector involvement in this, because there are ancillary benefits for us to do that.